Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield part of my time to Senator Klobuchar so she can have the opportunity to make some opening remarks. She's a leader of this effort, and I'll save my questions to the end of her remarks or after the next witness, if I may.
I'm doing marketing here to save our state is mask, but I wanted to thank everyone and just embrace everything that you guys have said in such wonderful words. You can see the creativity of the state of Tennessee, Senator Blackburn, coming through in your turn of phrases, Mr. Strickland, and I'm more than happy to have, with Senator Cornyn, led this, in your words, band of gypsies over here so that we can get something done. I think one of the things we've learned from this pandemic is it's not one size fits all, that not every business and every group of employees are affected in the same way. I know the home state of Jefferson Bus Lines, Minnesota, understand that. See it in the faces of the people literally starting to cry in an event at the Moorhead Blue Stem Amphitheater as they talked about the Merle Haggard concert, or see it in the face of Dana Frank, who heads up First Avenue in Minneapolis as we stood in front of that iconic star of Prince, knowing that he and so many other artists across this country could not have gotten their starts without entertainment venues. And I think we all know that you can't go stand in a mosh pit in the middle of a pandemic. I think you know you can't sit elbow to elbow in a small theater, whether it is in a big city or a little town. And so many of these venues are literally the heart of our communities. They're the place that people go. And since we're quoting a lot of things, we do not want to be the Congress that lets the music die. And we don't want this to be the year that we let our cultural icons die. So with that, Senator Cornyn and I have introduced this bill. We are working really, really hard to get it in the relief package. We're feeling good about the work that's going on. There still has to be some changes made. I'm also a big fan and co-sponsor of the Restart Act that you just spoke to, as well as the CERTS Act involving the bus lines. And again, I just want to remind our colleagues, and I know they know this, or we wouldn't be doing this hearing. Thank you to Chairman Moran and Ranking Member Blumenthal, if it wasn't for that understanding that not every industry, tech companies, man, they're doing great, but so many of these small venues are not. And so my question, I guess, of you, Mr. Harkey, with your cool drum set over there in Wichita, is just could you explain how it will be really hard to bring back these venues? It's just like you can't snap a finger and they're going to be able to come back with your low margins if we let the music die.
Yeah, I mean, many of our venues have taken generations to build. As I told an example of the Cotillion in Wichita, these are, you know, especially in smaller markets like Wichita, this is an ongoing effort that's, you know, passed on from generation to generation. To get the acts to come to Wichita, Kansas has been the work of many, many decades of people. So, you know, not only that, but to get the spaces that are appropriate for hosting music. I mean, you mentioned First Avenue. I mean, that's a magical place. Like, there's not another space like that in the world. So if you lose a First Avenue, it's going to be nearly impossible to replicate that. You can't just go into any warehouse and set a stage in it and it has that magic. And that's true of, you know, the Cotillion in Wichita and Kane's Ballroom in Tulsa and, you know, all these venues across the country that have been there, even if they're not historic. The new venues like Wave, I mean, it has a certain thing to it.
Mr. Harkey, because I just
sorry.
limited time, and Senator Blumenthal was so kind to give me this time early on. Could you talk about how it was hard enough for your venues, being independent venues, so many of you competing, as we've seen more and more consolidation with some of the big guys in the industry, and how to me, the pandemic has simply put a magnifying glass on this problem. We're not going to talk about antitrust here as I look at Senator Lee and Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal all involved in this issue. But could you talk about how it's hard to get by right now anyway without the pandemic?
I mean, the live music industry is increasingly difficult due to the consolidation of the industry, and mom and pop businesses are, fighting, tooth and nail to ensure they still get the shows and are able to route tours through the cities. And it's hitting secondary markets, just as hard as it's hitting major markets.
Okay, very good. And I think I'll end with you, Mr. Strickland. Just words for us as we go into these next few days, when everyone is waiting for a result from this Congress to be able to do a package at the end of the year. Any advice?
Again, consider the humanomics. There are 10+ million people holistically across this entire industry doing nothing. I want to reiterate that. We're not like restaurants or gymnasiums or hair salons that open and close and have a chance to do something. We're doing nothing. Right now, 97% of the people are either unemployed or underemployed. Can you imagine being a dental assistant and not being the dental assistant for 18 months and having to go work at Home Depot? That's what's happened. You've got a lot of really talented people, and we do this in the live event industry for one reason. We love it, for the love of the game, for the love of the music. And we've got entertainment and event people scattered across the landscape, working at Home Depot and Amazon, and it's soul crushing. And as an industry, not just venues, as an industry, we will not come back if we do not receive relief, because the restart style relief is the only thing that we have. We can't go get a commercial loan.
Thank you so much.
Yield the floor. Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today to honor and pay tribute to our Senate colleagues who are departing at the end of this Congress. I was able to work with all of them in different ways, and we're going to miss them. Before that, I did want to mention the importance of the continuing negotiations on end-of-the-year pandemic relief. I've been involved in those, and I have been really, I want to thank those members that have been at the forefront of this all through the weekend, all through the last few weeks. And I cannot stress how important it is right now. My state just got through a spike in COVID. We lost so many people. We have so many small businesses, like so many states in this country, that are closed down. And while we see the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine, I talked to a friend of mine whose husband is an infectious disease doctor, and she said when she saw those trucks rolling out of Michigan, she just started to sob, just seeing it on TV. And I think that's how a lot of people in this country feel. But it's on us right now to make sure we get the funding so that vaccine gets distributed as it should, and to also ensure that our economy is in a place that when we start going back into the workplace, not just virtually, that we will be able to bounce back as we should. And that means pandemic relief at the end of this year. So my departing colleagues, and I like every single one of them, and I'll start with my good friend, Senator Doug Jones. Throughout the years, I've gotten to know Doug, as so many of us have, as a colleague, but more importantly, as a friend. These past few years have not been easy for anyone, but what they have called for, who are leaders who will do what's right, who are willing to show courage and take risks. And one of those leaders is Doug Jones, a native of Fairfield, Alabama, and the son of a father who worked in the steel industry. My grandpa worked in the iron ore business underground. I know a little bit about this. Doug graduated from the University of Alabama and the University of Alabama Law School. Afterwards, he served as a top aide for his home state, Senator Howell Heflin. I still remember Howell Heflin long after Walter Mondale had left government. I was working with him in Minnesota, and Howell Heflin would call for him, and the accent was a little hard for a Minnesotan to get through. And I remember Mondale literally within a few hours howling with laughter when he took the call. And I'm sure that was a great mentor for Doug to have when he first got into politics. Doug then became the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, and in 2017 he became the first Democrat to represent Alabama in the U.S. Senate since 1997. I'll never forget the first speech Doug gave on the Senate floor. It was about gun violence, calling for bipartisanship and pragmatism, and for the courage to seize the moment. And he actually quoted Senator Huffman saying, "Our Constitution itself came about through a series of great compromises. It was not written by ideologues who clung to their way or no. Compromise and negotiation, the hallmarks of moderation aimed at achieving moderate centrist policies for our country, should not be viewed as negatives." Doug believed in a simple philosophy when he was here: never compromise your principles, and he certainly showed us that, but work with your colleagues, Democratic or Republican, to move our country forward. I remember what he said about gun safety in his maiden speech. He was hopeful that we may have reached a tipping point because, quote, "our young men and women are awakening the conscience of America." That's something that Doug has done in his time in the U.S. Senate. And he showed it even before that, when as a prosecutor, he brought closure to the families of the 4 little girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing by prosecuting those who sought to use fear, hatred, and violence to inhibit the rights of others. He did that for his state because that was his job. But in so doing, he brought closure and justice for our nation. We are all fortunate to call Doug a friend. He has been a champion for veterans after the tax bill had a problem for survivor benefits for Gold Star families. It was Doug who introduced the bill to fix the problem and got it passed for those who already made the ultimate sacrifice. It has truly been an honor and a privilege to work alongside Senator Jones. Integrity, decency, those are the words I think about when I think about Doug Jones, and he will be missed in this Senate. Senator Udall of New Mexico has been an incredible steward and champion of so many of the things at the heart of our country's greatness, like America's great outdoors and natural lands, a culture enriched by our tribal nations, and an enduring commitment to democracy. America's environment, our native communities, and our right to vote are some of the fundamental elements that make this country so unique. And Senator Udall has faithfully served the people of New Mexico and all Americans as an incredibly gifted national leader on these issues and so many more. I got to serve with Senator Udall on the Commerce Committee, where during the pandemic we worked together to bridge the digital divide and expand broadband, especially for our tribal communities, where, as we all know, he served as a ranking member of the top Democrat on the Indian Affairs Committee. I also was proud to serve with Senator Udall on the Rules Committee. We worked on Native American voting rights together, but he was the lead. He was the lead on so many bills that would make our democracy better. And I hope that one of his legacies is when he's gone, we will be able to finally put these laws into operation and get them done. One of his great pieces of legislation was a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, and one day we will get this done. So many people are tired of the money streaming into our politics, the fact that you have hidden money streaming into our politics, and his amendment would fix so much of this. He was also co-founder of the Congressional International Conservation Caucus, where he left his mark on this country with his work to protect public lands and national parks while promoting America's leadership in conservation. From his years as New Mexico's Attorney General to his 10 years of service in the House of Representatives and his 12 years as a U.S. Senator, Tom Udall has been literally a giant in public service. No one should be surprised. He once summed up what drove him by saying, "The thing that inspired me the most when I was very young was the idea that if you had a good idea of reforming something and you really stuck to it, you could literally change the world." Well, I'm going to miss Senator Udall, and we also are going to miss his wife, Jill, who I got to know well. I have a fond memory of one of the new senators' orientations where Tom and Jill and my husband, John, and I were tasked with talking to the arriving senators a few years ago, brand new in this building, and giving them tips on how they operate and how they handle their first few years and how you can stay married while being a U.S. Senator. I remember it fondly because Mitt Romney was sitting in the front row taking notes diligently, and I thought maybe he didn't need our advice on this. But Tom and Jill are just an incredible couple in a town where it's not always easy to keep such a strong, beautiful relationship. So I want to thank Senator Udall for his work on behalf of his state, the beautiful state of New Mexico, and thank the state for sharing their extraordinary senator with the nation for so many years. Senator Udall, thank you for your service, and I know that there is more to come. Senator Roberts. My colleague, Senator Pat Roberts, as we know, is the longest-serving member of Congress in Kansas history. He leaves the Senate as a giant in his home state and a true champion for the people of Kansas. In his words, he's a Kansan through and through. Born in Topeka, earning his journalism degree from Kansas State and representing Kansas for 16 years in the House and 22 years in the Senate. I serve on the Agriculture Committee, and he has been my chairman. And I have been proud to serve with him as a fellow farm state senator, where he has been a champion for the breadbasket of America, as Kansas is known. He has also worked tirelessly to honor those legendary Kansans who came before him. Earlier in this year, Senator Roberts was there to cut the ribbon at the dedication of the Eisenhower Memorial, a monument he has been devoted to as chairman of the Eisenhower Memorial Commission. And I know he's one of the few members of Congress who can actually say he met President Eisenhower. At the dedication, Senator Roberts remarked that Eisenhower understood one person's ability to chart his or her own course and change the course of the world. That's something that Senator Roberts has done, often in a quiet manner. I have really admired the way he worked across the aisle with Senator Stabenow every day, and they didn't always agree on everything, but they found common ground. I got to work with him on a number of issues, ensuring that our wheat growers would get sorely needed relief through the CARE program, making the tax code consistent with how farmers finance new equipment, protecting our food supply chain through investments in science and research. When I think about the legacy that Chairman Roberts will leave, I think about those investments in science and research through the creation of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility. Both of these facilities will play a critical role in helping today's farmers and ranchers tackle the many challenges that they face. He's also been co-chair of the Senate Rural Health Caucus, working to ensure quality health care, not just in urban areas where it's so important, but also in rural areas. We both come from families of newspapermen. Senator Roberts' great-grandfather, J.W. Roberts, founded the Oskaloosa Independent, the second oldest newspaper in Kansas. And my dad started at a Minneapolis paper as a sports reporter, where his main beat was the Minnesota Vikings. So maybe the things that we have in common stop there, but certainly that newspaper background is something we have talked about and share. I will miss Senator Roberts' humor, and I will miss his good work, and look forward to continuing to work with Senator Stabenow and Senator Bozeman as leaders of the Agriculture Committee. Next, Senator Alexander. Senator Alexander has served the people of Tennessee for more combined years as governor and senator than anyone else from their state. So with both Senator Roberts and Senator Alexander, we literally will be missing people that bring to this place the strong sense of commitment and long service to our government. Senator Alexander has served our country as he worked to find consensus on the issues that matter most, like education, health care, mental health, and addiction. I saw him work day by day with Senator Patty Murray, and they were able to pass so many bills to show this chamber that, in fact, you can get little things done, yes, but you can also get big things done, including the changes that they made that were long needed to No Child Left Behind, including the changes and the work that they've done when it comes to health care. As he gave advice to his successor, incoming Senator Bill Hagerty, he said, Lamar said, "It's hard to get here in the United States Senate. It's hard to stay here. And while you're here, you might as well try to accomplish something good for the country." Like his many quips, and I've read his book, his red plaid book of advice, and his many things he has shared with me for advice, including on running for president. Both may not have worked out for either of us, but you could tell the love that he brought to the people of this country and the people of his state, and how he talked about them and how he approached his work. As a former Secretary of Education under President George H.W. Bush, President of the University of Tennessee, and as Chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator Alexander, we know, has worked tirelessly to ensure every child can succeed. In addition to the work I just mentioned that he did with the Every Student Succeeds Act and the work he did on the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act, he's also led legislation to help people in their youngest years as well as their seniors year. I appreciated especially the work that he did on Alzheimer's and making sure that we continue to invest in our science and education. One little fact you may not know, and all the tributes that have come out about Senator Alexander, and I was here for his speech, was that every summer for 25 years, he and his wife and 4 children have gone to the Boundary Waters to canoe and fish. The Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota, very close to where my dad grew up. In fact, right the town that's the gateway to the Boundary Waters in Ely, Minnesota. Something that way back when Senator Alexander was going there for the first few years, my dad was writing about for the newspaper in an effort to make sure we kept the Boundary Waters protected. I certainly hope that Senator Alexander continues to spend time there and enjoy our lands and help the work that he has done, which he has seen on the Great American Outdoors Act, and see it firsthand. We know that his red and black flannel shirt will be welcome in Minnesota. It's something we see everywhere in northern Minnesota and throughout our state, and we hope to see him back soon. Next, my friend, Senator Enzi. True collegiality and camaraderie have sometimes been hard to come by in Washington these past few years. And that is why when I think about someone who never lets the temperature rise, who's always willing to find that common ground, who, as I heard him say, and I've heard him say many times before his closing speech here, is that, in his words, "I always believed we could agree on 80% of the issues and on 80% of each issue, and that if we focus on the 80%, we can do great things for the American people." I remember him saying that when he would work with Ted Kennedy and their genuine friendship, and I remember he said that many times to me as we worked on bills together. One of the first bills that I worked on a few years coming in here was with Senator Enzi, and it was about our paramedics and using the experience that they'd gained serving in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, making sure that when they came home, that they could use that experience immediately and put it to work on being paramedics in our own country, because we had a shortage. We still do, and we wanted to respect that experience. So many of them in small towns where they would have to travel then to get the final degree that they needed to be able to continue working as a paramedic. And Mike and I wanted to make sure that that experience they had serving our country would be put to good use and would allow them to get those degrees faster. I was also fortunate to work with Mike on trying to turn the page on U.S.-Cuba policy and forge a new path. He was always willing to work with me on that and be one of the co-sponsors of my bill to lift the embargo, something that I hope will eventually get done in his honor, as he understood that the way we get to democratic change in Cuba was by enhancing our relationship, and that the Cuban people did not necessarily share the same views, and many of them do not, of their government, and that so many people in Cuba love America, and that it was very important for us to improve that relationship. As chair of the Budget Committee and one of only 2 accountants in the Senate, Senator Enzi has also been dedicated to addressing our deficit and debt challenges. He has long urged the federal government to move to biannual budgeting, something that I support as well, and something that my friend Jean Shaheen has been working with him on. So Senator Enzi has a lot of smart proposals that he has put forward. And I mostly, though, will remember his spirit that we saw and see every week at the prayer breakfast. Of course, he can still come back to that as a former member, but also the work that he did in the Senate and how he would genuinely try to find common ground. I've told him many times how much I love his state, having once bicycled from Minneapolis to Jackson Hole to get there. 1,200 miles in 11 days with my dad, and how when my husband and I in the middle of the pandemic decided to drive one place this summer, we drove to Wyoming and hiked in the Tetons. And so I look forward, I hope, to seeing Mike and Diana there, and I hope him all the best in his retirement. Senator Gardner. So Senator Gardner and I served together on the Commerce Committee. And throughout his tenure as a member of Congress, he has been a champion of public lands. And of course, with the beautiful, beautiful national parks in Colorado, I think you couldn't be doing your job for your state if you weren't such a leader on lands. He has worked tirelessly to pass the very important Great American Outdoors Act, historic legislation that invests in our commitment to ensuring our nation's trails, public lands, parks, and open spaces remain protected and accessible for generations, while also permanently funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I was proud to co-sponsor this legislation, which, as you all know, was signed into law in August. We've also worked together on the Commerce Committee on travel and tourism, hit especially hard during this pandemic. He may have a little bigger ski hills than we have in Minnesota, maybe some higher mountains than we have, but we both share not only a love for the outdoors, but also an understanding of how much tourism contributes to our economy. Together, we worked along with Senator Blunt and Senator Cortez Masto to reauthorize the bipartisan Brand USA bill, which was also signed into law. Since 2013, Brand USA has generated a total economic impact of nearly $48 billion by allowing our country to pair up with the private sector to reach out to visitors, to get them to come to America, whether it is the Rocky Mountains in Colorado or whether it is the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. Last year, Brand USA generated $4.1 billion in incremental visitor spending, resulting in a marketing return on investment of 32 to 1. I also have fond memories of getting to know Senator Gardner and his wife, both at the last inauguration at the lunch, which I'll just share, not every detail, but let's say it was a memorable lunch that we had. And then also we one time got to do a humor speech together when there was a last minute cancellation and I had 3 hours to fill in for the winter gridiron dinner. And Senator Gardner did not find out until I got there and had to quickly change his jokes from Senator Warner to me, which the jokes about billionaires didn't really fit for my fiscal situation, or millionaires. And Senator Gardner was great, and we had a lot of fun that night as well. So we're going to miss him and miss all these senators. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this all at once was that I think we have to remember that this Senate and this institution is bigger than ourselves, that people do come and go, and they all make their mark. And you don't necessarily remember everyone's names, and nor does everyone in your state, of who is there late at night, either passing the Great Outdoors Act, or who's the one that's willing to work with a freshman Democratic senator to get a bill passed on paramedics, or to be willing to take that a little bit of a risk and work on some issues that maybe aren't popular in your own political party. And all of these senators in their own way have shown that courage, whether it's Doug Jones giving his first speech on gun safety, whether it is Senator Tom Udall, who had a decision to make, and what he knew would be his last 2 years. Was he going to be the ranking member of the Rules Committee or the Indian Affairs Committee? And he chose Indian Affairs because he knew that mattered, and that this was a group of people that had been so long overlooked, and he was going to spend his last 2 years helping them. So I will miss all these senators, and I just know that they know their work will live on. But it's just a reminder to all of us that maybe 100 years they won't remember who we are, but people will be benefiting from generations to come from their work. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.